Remember the reason you started your business in the first place. Don't let that get lost. And I think that the first year to 2 years, if you make it through that first year without going under, good for you. If the business that you're in requires you to have some of that office space, look and see who you can share space with and come to an agreement about the split of time and how you book it out so that you're not in each other's way or that it's not sitting empty because you both want it at the same time. And just don't let it suck the life out of you. It's supposed to be what you're breathing life into without killing yourself because it's something you're passionate about.
Feeling stuck or overwhelmed, ready to shift your mindset and embrace a more fulfilling life? In today's episode, we're sitting down with Linda Wilson, a keynote speaker, coach, and the founder of Loving Life's Journey. Linda specializes in helping people move past feelings of stagnation and start living with more intention and gratitude. She shares practical ways to raise your vibration, focus on growth, and cultivate self-worth so you can approach the future with a renewed sense of hope and purpose. If you're looking for real strategies to improve your life, this conversation is for you. Thank you so much, Linda, for being here today. It is such a pleasure to have you. I know when I heard your story, I was like, I have to have Linda on. So thank you so much for being here first and foremost, because it's an honor to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on. And yeah, I'm excited.
Me too. Well, I would love for you to just really dive into how did you get here today? What has your journey looked like? We can dive a little bit deeper as we go because I know there's been a lot of hurdles and everything else in between, but I would love to know for everybody else to know too, where you started and where you are now.
Where I started was as while I was still working in the corporate world, I had several small businesses, one after the other, and it was great. It was a way for me to take the skills and abilities that I had and use them in a way outside of the structure of being in a corporate environment. In the early days, I did website design, I did graphic design, and that was a lot of fun. And it was a way to be creative where I couldn't be creative at work because I was doing their work. And one of the things I noticed when I finally got into just being full-time employed for myself was I hadn't really realized all the other things I was going to have to do to be in business. And by then it was my photography business. And I was thinking, oh, good, I just get to go out and take pictures and, do family portraits and take nature pictures. And I get to spend all my time doing photography. Well, no, I suddenly became the marketer, the networker, I had to do everything. And this was like in the early 2000s. So it was around 2008, 2009, 2010. And at that time, they were really promoting you can do everything yourself, which you can. And if you enjoy that, great. If you don't enjoy that, it was very difficult because marketing is not something I'm terrific at, and it's not something especially back then, I didn't really enjoy it. I just wanted to be able to let my photos do the talking for me. So and it was just me. So I didn't have staff. I didn't have somebody making my appointments. I didn't have somebody writing my posts or my blogs or my marketing materials. I was doing it all. My husband tried to help a lot, but not the creative type at all. I loved him dearly, but it was not his forte. Plus, he was working his full-time job, and that kept him very busy. So I remember early on thinking, this isn't the kind of stuff they talked about. I took the courses through the SBA, the Small Business Administration. Now, I haven't done them since then, and I don't know how they've updated that. But at the time, they were showing you all the ways you could do everything yourself. And I found after about 3 years, it started turning my dream into a job because, the photography part was great and I loved taking the photos. I loved getting them ready for my clients. Everything else was drudgery and I didn't like doing it. I didn't like having to ask people to pay me. I didn't like having to hound people to pay their bills or to not try to talk me down in price. And I found that it took the fun out of it.
I believe that. And that's
And,
the part.
and I don't know about now, but they didn't tell us about that then. And I honestly don't know if they talk about that now.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but I think that's a really good point because a lot of times you are wearing multiple hats and trying to figure things out because you go into business because you have a passion for whatever it is, whether it's like making pastries, photography, coaching, but then you don't realize all the things that go on in the back end. And like that was not my strength either. But I feel like a lot of people listening too probably struggle with that similarly. That is not what their wheelhouse is, and having to learn it from scratch. And when you're not good at something or not, it doesn't come natural, it really can put a damper on the progression of it. So I'm curious with your photography business, once you started to learn the ins and outs for those 3 years, you were getting settled in that. What did that look like after that?
The 2 years after that was better. I was learning to kind of stick to my guns for one thing. Especially in those kind of lines of work like photography, website design, if they think you're starting out, oh, you know, why don't you do it for free? It's great exposure for you. And while it can be great exposure, it doesn't pay the bills. When I'm talking with small business owners that are just starting for the first time, I just remind them, number one, you got to look after yourself because if you burn out, what happens to your job and your business? What happens to your livelihood? You don't want to take the joy out of it. And my husband was really good. Being a photographer, every trip was a business trip because I took great photos while I was there. And there were times where I actually picked up gigs while I was traveling, or I traveled for a gig and I would add some on. I did a lot of work in the Scottsdale, Arizona area. And so I would go out for one thing and, I would call my husband and say, I've got this thing came up. Do you mind if I stay a couple more weeks? Our son was grown. We didn't have family at home. So that was not a burden on him. But, I was constantly reframing when I started doing one-way tickets because I just didn't know how long I was going to be down there. So that was kind of, that's the fun part.
Yeah.
And I've gotten better about the marketing part. But what I found is that there are people that love to do marketing. If finances are an issue, there are barter groups out there where you can trade services. And it's not necessarily a one-for-one trade. It's a big group of businesses that put items or services in for trade. So if I need a marketer, I can go to the group and I can get marketing services, but the marketer doesn't necessarily need my coaching. So somebody else, you know what I mean? So you don't have to, it's not an exact trade. It's
Right.
not, I trade with you, you trade with me, and we're good. And that was something I had never thought about doing. And my friend Lydia, she's does gift baskets and she's belonged to two barter groups since I've known her. And I never understood how it worked. And I'm like, oh, what a great idea.
Why did I think of that?
I was always thinking, well, who needs what I do on a barter basis? Well, it doesn't have to be, you find ways to have something to offer. And some of the tools that I used back then, I have to remind myself those tools have been upgraded a lot. I did graphic design and I did photography, so I did a lot with Photoshop, Illustrator, and those wonderful things. And I still use them a lot, but they can be costly. So for somebody starting out, there's a lot of different tools that are very similar to that without you having to go whole hog into buying top of the line until you get more established. Because having computer equipment that can handle all that. And my camera equipment, my best lens cost me $1,400. And my husband almost, and he says, well, will it make a difference for your business? And I said, yes. And he said, then let's do it. I had support and a lot of people don't. So, be creative in the ways that you can do things. It doesn't have to be your taxes and your financials. Keep those by the book, but everything else you can be creative with.
I was just having this conversation about like thinking outside the box. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be in a pretty little box with a pretty little bow. It usually doesn't look like that in entrepreneurship ever, but
No.
all the ups and downs and everything. But I think to your point, it is being creative. Think how you can really maximize your time and energy, and being able to potentially barter with other individuals. It might not be a one for one, but being able to be smart about it and work smarter, not harder aspect of it.
Right, right. And remember the reason you started your business in the first place. Don't let that get lost. And I think that the first year to 2 years, if you make it through that first year without going under, good for you. It can be pretty brutal. I had, again, the flexibility. I didn't have to have office space. I worked from home and I traveled. I didn't have studio space. I was natural light. So I was outside. And even with the coaching that I do now, that runs from my home. I can do virtual or in-person visits, but I don't have to have office space. There's nothing about what I do that requires me to spend money on a location that only gets used a portion of the time. If the business that you're in requires you to have some of that office space, look and see who you can share space with and come to an agreement about the split of time and who get, how you book it out so that you're not in each other's way or that it's not sitting empty because you both want it at the same time. I know groups that there's two or three different businesses that'll share a space. If I'm leaving and I'm not somebody else is coming in tomorrow, my stuff gets moved so that they have their space. And there's ways to make it work. Yeah, and just don't let it suck the life out of you. It's supposed to be what you're breathing life into without killing yourself because it's something you're passionate about.
Exactly. I love
So
that.
you really do have to, sometimes you just have to step away for a little bit.
Absolutely. And it's a really good point you brought up because I know so many people in particular the therapy world where they'll share a private practice and people will use different offices. I know I did back in the day when I was a therapist, but also I know so many people who do that in the health industry as well, where they'll maybe a Reiki healer versus like an acupuncturist versus something else, and they all share.
Right. There's the massage therapist, all of
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Even estheticians,
Hmm.
and as long as, everybody's knows what the expectation is for what you decide and everybody follows it, that's an excellent way to not have to have that huge capital outlay. You just need some space, but you don't need space 24/7 because nobody can work 24/7. I'm a little bit older, so I've come to the realization that, it's going to have to be something pretty dang severe to get me to kill myself like that again.
Yeah.
But
We
it
live
also
and
depends on
learn.
the line of work you're doing. If you're a physician, like an emergency room physician or a surgeon, depending on the kind of work you do, there are going to be times that it is a 24/7 deal.
Yeah, that's very true. But for
And
most
you
of
can
us
make it.
entrepreneurs,
It is. And, your residency kind of beats that into you. You're pretty much on call for what, 4 years?
I think so. I mean, I'm not 100% sure. I just watch Grey's Anatomy. They seem like they're always in the hospital.
Yeah, that's true. But it seems like, those first years are brutal and there's a reason for it. Everybody says it's unfair. I said, well, they have to be able to do that.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
have to be able to get through that because that's depending on their specialty and where they think they're going to work, you know?
yeah.
It's,
Very true.
emergency room doesn't have hours.
Absolutely right.
And emergencies don't have hours.
No, they don't. And
Yeah, they
it's
pop
exhausting.
up whenever it seems to be the most inconvenient.
I believe that. I've seen that
You
personally,
do.
indirectly. I know you've seen that. And because I want to bring that up too, because I know you've been through so much, a lot of obstacles that you've had to overcome personally, professionally. When you were in photography and then switched to coaching and like added coaching to your repertoire, what were some of the obstacles that you faced personally and professionally?
Well, personally, I lost my voice for 18 months. That was difficult. By then, I was no longer doing photography for health reasons. I had to let that go. And I was doing network marketing, and my upline, the people that signed me on, were amazing. For 18 months, in order to be heard, I had to scream, and it was extremely fatiguing, and not a whole lot of volume came with it. So they did all my calls with me, they went to all my appointments with me. And when it would get really fatigued, it would start to make my sinuses drain and my eyes water, and then I would start choking. And I found it disgusting myself because it was all phlegmy and I was making horrible noises. So we had this arrangement. Then that started up. I would give them the sign and I would leave the room and they would just continue talking with the client while I would go in and take care of myself and pull myself together and come back. And that went on for a really long time. Got that taken care of, but in the process of that, I ended up in ICU isolation for 5 months. And that was all personal stuff. And it was probably more difficult for my family because I didn't see a lot of what was going on with me, but they certainly did. And it was kind of traumatizing. On a professional level, the hurdles I had was trying to reinvent myself afterwards. I've got a great tribe of family and friends. They know me best as the photographer. And it's been going on 13 years and I love them. They're still very good friends, but they still see me in that role. They don't understand the switch. They don't understand what I do. They think they have to understand what I do, which they don't. They can just support me by saying, go get them. And that professionally, if you're reinventing yourself and you're staying in the same space, my husband and I had reinvented ourselves a couple of times, but we actually moved to a new city. That was part of the he took a job in a new city and we would move and we would start over. That presents its own challenges, but that's also somewhat easier because you're starting in a place nobody knows you. There's no preconceived expectations of how you're going to behave, what to expect from you. So that was one of the best things we ever did was make those two moves because I was able to leave behind a lot of my baggage that I put on myself. Nobody put on me. I put it on myself. And that was the easiest way to leave it behind. I got someplace and I'm like, oh yeah, they don't know what a loser I am. They don't know what a screw up I am. And I got to start over and be good at what I was doing. And I mean, I interview well, I work well, I do all those things, but for some reason I had allowed myself to feel that I was not able to do that. And so once I was able to get away from that, that was huge. I would say professionally, the best tools you have are your mindset and the five closest people you hang around with. What are their mindsets? Are they people that support you in what it is you're trying to do? And do not be alarmed, do not be upset if those supporters are not your family and your best friends because they love you, they want the best for you, and more than likely, they don't want to see a significant change in you that might change the relationship that you have with them.
Gold right there. And I appreciate you sharing the obstacles that you've had to overcome because when I heard that, I was like, what? Just like what you happened with your voice and just being
Mhm.
in ICU and isolation for 5 months and everything else that you had to endure throughout that process and still coming out stronger and better than ever now and just everything that you've had to overcome. But I love what you said about reinventing yourself and not be afraid to do so because a lot of times people do pigeonhole you into this is what you've been doing for X amount of years, whether it's photography, a different field, whatever it is. But recognizing you can pivot anytime you want to. And I think moving does sometimes help. When I moved California, then I moved here to Colorado and got to reinvent myself. I was still the same person, but even just switching careers and switching businesses and knowing that's okay. You don't have to stay stagnant in whatever it is you've done previously. And you're right, it's really hard sometimes for people around us to accept that. And it changes the relationship because now you're reinventing yourself. You're shedding the layers of like, okay, well, this is who I want to be now. I'm still this person, but I've evolved and it's okay to evolve. And what would you say to entrepreneurs that maybe want to pivot, but they're nervous of like, okay, well, I've been doing this for so long, but now I want to jump into this field or this industry?
I'm going to say that there's one thing the pandemic gave us. It was the realization that tomorrow's not guaranteed. And if you're feeling called to make that switch, whether, whatever source that's speaking to you very strongly, I would say do it. And if there's a financial part to that that you need to make sure is secure before you do it. One of the things I did when I went to my photography is I miscalculated what we needed because my business did not take off immediately. I put us into bankruptcy and luckily, my husband was like, well, he says, I could have been watching too. Unless you just really feel the need to walk away from your family, you can make those switches without destroying family relationships. But you also have to be willing to not let anything negative that they might be saying, trying to protect you, not to allow that to make you change your mind. It takes a lot of mental fortitude to make those kind of changes. And again, that's one of those things that they don't talk about. They say, follow your dream. Yes, follow your dream. But guess what? It is not the yellow brick road. The minute you're out of the gate, something is going to come up. And just know that the more things that try to get in your way, it's just finding out whether you are really serious about wanting to do what you want to do. And if you are, think about it. Think about how many times we say we can't afford something, but if there's something we really want, we find a way.
Yes.
It's that same thought process, you need to have that same passion, that same pull, because making any changes in your life for growth is not easy. And you have to really want it to go through the process. I mean, you know, you don't put yourself through that if you're not really invested in it because it's not easy. It's not supposed to be.
Everybody
I
will
know.
be good.
Spoiler. It's not supposed to be. Sorry. You're gonna have to work for it.
It's so true, but I do agree. It's who you surround yourself with, and I'm glad you brought this up because a lot of times our family and friends want to be supportive, but they want to protect us because they've maybe never been in that industry or have seen other people in different capacities not have success, and they don't want you to fail. And entrepreneurship, the epitome of entrepreneurship is failure because you're going to
Yeah.
try things, things are going to work, other things are not, but recognizing that it's not a dig for the most part. Majority of families
Yeah.
are not trying to be like, no, you can't do this, but it's believing in yourself and knowing that there are going to be, when you were explaining the Yellow Brick Road and like going through
Yeah.
the gate, I just saw like tumbleweed come through, then like a tornado in my
Yeah.
head. I
Yeah.
just saw the weather or Wicked.
And that's the thing, I don't think most family and friends are trying to be mean. They
No.
are afraid for us. And some of that could be that maybe they tried to make a change and it did not go the way they expected. And instead of keep going, they gave up and they don't want us to have that pain. The thing is if it's something we really feel the need to do, if we don't try, we're going to feel the pain anyway. That's the true failure. Is if we say, okay, I'm too afraid to do it. Now, I'm not talking about doing physical things that you might be killing yourself to do. Don't try to do Simone Biles routine without being
Oh,
very, very, very good at, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Don't put yourself in harm's way physically.
Right.
But we were watching, that's funny, we were watching the Olympic reruns the other day, and I'm like, how do you learn how to do, how many broken bones do you get learning how to skateboard and do the things that they do? Because skateboarding, that's done on cement. I'm sorry, that's not in the grass. It's not in a soft area.
No.
That's bones on cement. I expect them all, and they're not even padded up. They got their little helmet on and that's it. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
I don't know how they do it. More
I
power
know.
to them.
I tried skateboarding. That was not for me. I tried snowboarding. That was not for me. So that kind of takes a level of coordination that I no longer are. Well, I never had. Who am I fooling?
It's a special skill set. I mean, I feel like snowboarding was like okay for me, but like skateboarding, no, no. I
And
need
the thing is if I really, really wanted to do it, I would be willing to go through that. But I'm not that invested in it. It's not that important to me.
exactly. It's trying it. And I think like the things that we are invested in, giving it a fair opportunity. And sometimes it's just tweaking things. And I'm just really curious because going from photography to coaching, what was that transformation like for you? Because I know you said you moved and you were looking at different options as well.
Well, the photography and the coaching both were started in Denver. And I think for me, the move was I've been through so much, and so many people kept asking me, well, how did you do this? How did you get through this? And I have a strong faith, so a lot of that I attribute to God carrying me because that's how I felt it. But also, I learned from watching others. And what I did especially was watch my friend Lydia, how she dived in for everything we needed. She was at the hospital with Jeff and Randy when I was sick. She was at the hospital with me and Randy when my husband was sick. She was there for that first 3 months I was in isolation. Before I went into isolation, she was up there every day helping my husband and my son. She'd come sit with me if they wanted to go get something to eat or something. She was there every day. And that was a 48-mile drive each way because we live out in Green Valley Ranch, out by DIA. And I was a good Samaritan in Lafayette. For a while, Jeff couldn't drive. He had broken his fracture in his leg. And so he couldn't drive. And so somebody would drive him out and back every day. And then Lydia would go out and sit with them. And what I did is I just kind of made a note of all of the things people did for us to help us get through things. And my mom was the biggest prayer warrior I have ever seen, from her lips to God's ears. And I know she's bugging him now up in, she's on now, but I know she's up there still telling him who to keep eyes on. And I had people that I had never met in person sending me healing energy, praying for me, doing all of those things. I was never actually alone. And when my husband was dying, I was never alone. people took care of us. I started kind of keeping track of the thing, going back and making notes over all the things that they were doing to help us. You hear about meal trains when somebody gets sick, they do a meal train. We had all of that kind of stuff. We had people that made sure we got to doctor's appointments if one of us couldn't drive. There, my brother came from Spokane and went out to Omaha and got my parents when I got really sick, and he wasn't going to wait for the doctor to say what was going on. He drove 8 hours out and got him and turned him right around and drove another 8 hours back. And if you've never had my dad backseat drive for 8 hours, you have to know what a loving thing that was for my brother.
I can only imagine.
My dad was a traveling salesman for his career. So yeah, he was usually the one that drove. And my brother's like, no, you're not driving. We're just gonna go now.
No questions. Just get in the car.
And be quiet. And be quiet. Yeah, only family can do that, right?
Yeah, there's limitations.
Yes, there is. How much money are you gonna give me to a good dad?
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe Jeff paid him. I don't know.
that could be.
Because we grew up with my dad. We knew what he was going to be like.
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't remember that part. I heard about it later.
I'm sure. Oh, that's too funny.
I know, but and that's the other thing, family dynamics, and we all have our own. The saying for me and our friends growing up, and we all said it was, our family puts the fun in dysfunctional.
Yeah, that's true.
And every family has its type
Yes.
of dysfunction. There
Yeah,
is no perfect family.
agreed.
So it's learning how to accommodate and not take everything personally.
Yeah.
I think that's probably for the coaching that I do now, that's a big part of the self-care stuff I talk about is when people react in a certain way, I would say it's maybe 1 in 1,000 that it's actually you they're reacting to. There's something else going on, and you are just being the recipient of their trauma or their going on in their life, and you just happen to be the one that gets loaded on. And if we can look at things that way, I think we can find that we can be much more compassionate towards other people. We can be much more forgiving for the outbursts. Because if I get mad at you because you yelled at me, you're not going to remember, and you're probably not going to know I'm mad at you. And you're probably not going to care. Unless we're like best friends and I never talk to you again, you're probably not going to care. And I'm the one fuming and carrying all the negative energy, and they don't have any idea anything happened because they just had this outburst and it's done.
A lot there. I mean, we could talk about this for a whole episode, especially because I was a marriage and family therapist.
Right. You heard all this before. This is nothing new.
But no, everyone listening probably can relate to a lot of that too. And it's just recognizing, like, because I'm somebody who used to take things personal and I had to like unlearn a lot of that as well. But a lot of times it's just a projection, even if going even back to people that in your family that are maybe like, oh, I don't think you should go into the entrepreneurship world or like do that industry or whatever it is. It's almost like this fear, and they're projecting their own insecurities or fears onto you, and that might not be their intention, but subconsciously that's what's happening. Even with like the example of the outburst, like it has nothing to do with you. Maybe it's just you caught them at a time where maybe they got a phone call or dealing with another situation that's evoked that emotion, and you were just the recipient of it. And then they're like, okay, I'm done. Because that's maybe how their brain works. And then the person
And they might not even realize they have done it. I mean,
yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
we can trigger someone with something very innocuous because that's triggering for them, but we have no idea, especially if we don't know them. If it's an interaction with a stranger. But growing up, I took everything personally. Nobody made me feel that way. I took everything. In fact, I was so miserable with myself. I mean, it's hard to have friends when you don't like yourself. And so I tried to always beat people to the punch, and I invited myself to everything because I was afraid I wouldn't get invited. I didn't give them a chance. I would just tell them I would be there, and then, they let me show up. But, but nobody wants to be around someone who has that feeling of desperation. And I didn't realize it at that time. It wasn't until we made that move, that first move where we moved to a new city, and I suddenly realized that there wasn't anybody expecting me be a doormat to let them walk all over me or to me to screw up because they didn't know that. And I had so many interviews lined up when we got to Cheyenne. I'm like, oh wow, maybe I do have value. And I went into those interviews with, I had broken out in hives on my face and my upper body. from the stress of trying to get us packed up and moved from Omaha to Cheyenne. And I went in looking like a train wreck. And each interview, they hired me. And then I'd start working, I'd get another interview because I had put in the resume, and that group would hire me with a better position and salary. And we did that. I did that 3 times in the first week. And that was something I would have never thought could happen. And I thought, oh, hey, maybe I'm not a total screw up.
Yeah.
And nobody made me feel like a screw up except me. And then when you treat yourself that way, it gives other people permission to treat you that way.
Exactly. And it's being able to realize too, we have the power within to make those choices and what we allow in or don't allow in. And because I think a big part of even your coaching is just the self-care and really pouring into ourselves. And I would love to know a client success story or two, what it looks like to even work with you in that process.
Let me see what's a good one. The ladies that I was working with was just really down on herself for no particular reason. I think she just suddenly started to question her worthiness. And we did some work. We did the 12-week program and we did some work together. And it helped that she had someone like me to reinforce her, her successes during the week because she wasn't sharing them with her family. She wasn't telling anybody about the things that she was doing that was working. So there was no celebration. And I said, do you tell them? And she says, well, no, they're busy. And I said, well, don't you think they'd want to celebrate that with you? And she started learning to, she started small, but she would share the small, maybe a small one that day. And everybody would see that, she was looking for some support. And by the end of the 12 weeks, she was in a position where she felt good about sharing the smallest win or the large one. It didn't matter. She would pick a win of the day and she'd share it with them. And we met weekly. So by the second week, she was making a list to share with me. And then pretty soon it was, are you sharing that list with your family? Well, no, I don't want to share the whole, well, share 2 or 3 things. And it was very gradual. And it's important to recognize that the gradual things are just as we're celebrating as the big ta-da, because whether you realize it or not, it took a lot of gradual things to get to that big ta-da.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you helped her be able to really vocalize those celebrations because I feel like we don't celebrate it enough, the things that we're doing, the smallest wins. Maybe the big wins were a little bit easier to celebrate.
Well, yeah, because then you feel like it's special, but treat them all special, make them welcome
Yes.
so that more will come. Think about it. If you talk smack about your best friend all the time, how long would they be your best friend? So if you don't make the small wins welcome, why would the big one come?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it goes back to feeling worthy. And I know that's another huge part of your coaching is helping people feel that because just from your journey, all the obstacles, everything that you've had to overcome to really stand in your power, your ground, be able to really illuminate that to other people as well. Because I feel like we lead by example and being able to go through the work you've gone through to get to the other side of things and now doing that for others. I'm curious because once you did go from photography to coaching, what was that transition like for you to start coaching and start putting yourself out there in that capacity?
It was very exciting and very fulfilling. It was like, yes, this is why I've had the experiences I've had, so I could help show others that you can get through the things life throws at you if you allow yourself to get through it and not hold yourself back. That was so huge for me. And the more I do it, the more I want to do. I feel like that is my calling right now. And it's to be that support system for others who feel like they don't deserve anything good or they just don't know how to get to the good. Let me help you find the path.
Yes.
You pick what you want to do, and then together we'll work on a way to make that happen.
I love it. I think it's important to know you're not alone. And self-care is thrown around a lot. The word, the entity of it, and what we should be doing, shouldn't be doing. But what are some of the common myths about self-care that entrepreneurs might believe and how they can overcome these misconceptions to take better care of themselves?
I think one of the big misconceptions is that it's selfish. And in fact, one of my friend such a coach says, it's okay if it's selfish. You need to look after yourself and change your thought process of what the word selfish means. And if you really can't change that, if selfish still is a bad word for you and being selfish doesn't feel right, then remind yourself, who's going to do the things you do if you can't do them anymore? And if you don't have a list of 5 or 10 people that can just step in and take over, then it's not selfish to take care of yourself, because think of what's going to happen if you're not there tomorrow to take care of things. And I think people forget that whether we want to admit it or not, the world is going to go on without us, unless, we're here at Armageddon. I don't plan to be. I plan for that to be long after I'm gone. But again, I remember working with people that wanted to be irreplaceable at work. And I said, why? Don't you want to be able to take time off for vacation? Well, yeah. I said, well, if you think you're irreplaceable, then you can't have vacation time either. Is that how you want your job to be? I always wanted to show people how to do what I did, because I wanted to have my time off. I wanted to be able to take time off. And when my husband got sick, I wanted to be able to feel that I could not be disturbed while I was with him, because I showed somebody else how to do what I do. I never want to be the only person that knows how to do something. Good heavens, no.
It just brought back some like really bad memories for me in corporate. But
Right, and people see that as job security, but it's really not. It's not. It's life sucking.
yes, might as well do something that
And
feels
I'm
so.
not saying that being in corporate is bad.
No,
Um, there are many people that the corporate environment is perfect for them. That's what they enjoy. And there's certain things that are done that really the only place it's going to happen. And that's great. I just learned over time that my mouth doesn't have a filter much anymore. And so working in corporate was not always the easiest job for me, because especially after, you know, have a couple open heart surgeries and you're feeling pretty bold, what are you going to do to me, right? I don't have to take this.
no. A lot of people do, they do. And like to your point, I feel like, there's some individuals that thrive in that environment and that is wonderful. And I feel like I was one of those people that wanted to not be replaceable, but it ended up burning me out to the
Yeah.
core. So I feel like, it's everybody's experience is different and that's what's so unique about it. But really knowing the lanes that we want to be in versus the lanes that we're like, I'm going to stay far away from that one.
And I think when we're younger, we want the benefits, we want the security.
Of course, yeah.
But that is, just in my age group, that what corporate looks like has changed. It's not one job for 30 years anymore and you get this lovely severance package when you leave. That doesn't happen much anymore. The reason to put yourself in one lane and stay there forever has changed. That doesn't come up so much anymore. And even in the same, if you stay with the same company, you could have many opportunities to do something different. So you don't necessarily have to give up your time and your benefits. If you want to change what you're doing, your company probably has something in line with what you want to do that you might be able to move into. So be creative, be open. And I would say definitely be open to what opportunities come to you. Make sure it's the right opportunity, but be open to receiving them. And on the self-care side, remember that before you can make your dream come true, you have to be looking after yourself, because nobody else is going to fight for your dream like you do. And if you want your business to be successful, you need to be healthy mentally and physically enough to get it off the ground yourself. There's people that will help, but the full investment of time and heart and soul comes from you. So you better be looking after all of that.
Yeah.
It's a gift, and you are a gift to your dreams. So don't let it get sick.
Yeah. No, that's very wise and important to really let that sink in for a minute because I think that is important because taking care of ourselves, if we don't have our health, how can we do all the things we want to do, but also not being in something that's really sucking out the soul of us as well? Because I feel like there's extremes, of course, and you're going to have to do things you don't want to do for your business, especially in the beginning, of course,
Yeah,
but
but
that's
that's
just
part of the journey. And that's where
absolutely.
you find out what parts you want to do and what parts you don't.
Exactly. And for those entrepreneurs starting out, maybe in their first, second, maybe even third year of business, what tips would you say are so important for them to know? I know you've already given a lot of insight.
Especially if you work from home. Try to set really good boundaries between your personal life and your work life and honor the boundaries. Don't just set them, but honor them. Now, when you're first starting out, that sometimes is pretty hard, but just know that if you have to jiggle the boundaries because something urgent has come up, to remind yourself to take some extra time after whatever crisis you dealt with. It is possible to set the boundaries. It's not always easy, but it is possible. And what you have to remember is sometimes your business needs some breathing room too. And if you're hovering over it all the time and not letting it get the oxygen and the air it needs to breathe and grow, baby it and take care of it, but don't smother it. Does that make sense?
Oh my God, that's a beautiful analogy because I was like, oh, that, like, I never thought of it in that way because, you need to take breaks, like, work, like, have your business, but not be in your business all the time. But the way you explained it was so elegantly of just how it really is. It needs room to breathe. You don't want to be like a helicopter over it every 5 seconds, but
Because think about what helicopter blades do to something small in the ground, right? If it's not a big, robust, mature tree or a solid building, if it's new, helicoptering over it is going to continually expose it. Give it a chance to get roots. Now, that doesn't mean ignore it, but you can't spend 24/7 in your business working on your business. You physically and mentally cannot, and your business will not survive that. Don't ignore it, but allow it, water it. And if you don't see it coming up right away, it's not going to come up right away. You got to give it its time to take root and to start growing. So treat it lovingly, keep doing the right things, and know that when the time is right, it's going to pop through the ground and start growing and blooming. And don't dig it up and throw it away saying it's dead. Don't put something else on top of it. Don't block out the sun. Don't forget to water it.
yeah, no, I'm just like, oh, that really stuck with me because I do think it gives it that perspective of how we can be like running things into the ground and just be like, okay, I'm done versus, okay, well, maybe it needs a little more water, maybe it needs more nurturing, or maybe I just need to let it simmer for a little bit and have that like go into the soil if it is like you're watering it, it's just all
Yeah,
these pictures came into my head of that. I love it.
I'm very visual, so
Yes, oh my. My mind always goes like that. But I feel like a lot of people listening are as well. But even with you've given so many great tips and just insights of your journey, ups and downs, everything in between. You've already achieved so much success. What do you foresee in the next few years, future aspirations or goals that you have for your business, for where you're going in the next few years?
I just see it getting more robust, getting bigger, me helping more people. I'm 62 and people are talking to me about retirement, and I have no intention of retiring. I love what I get to do. And until that changes, I'm just looking forward to being able to do it more and more and more and more and to help more people and to be a resource. I
Absolutely.
just, I think that's why I'm still here. So that's my plan.
I love your plan and I can't wait to see you continue to expand because I know you've already worked with so many incredible people, mentors, and everything else that have been there along your journey to see you continue to thrive and really lend that hand to the people that really need it. And I feel like we could all use it, but when it comes to self-care.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well,
Well,
that's what I'm here for.
yes, exactly. Well, Linda, I've been so enjoying this conversation, but where can people find you, find your services? We're going to link everything below, but if you could let us know too.
Go to lindamariewilson.com. That's my website, and it has all the information. Or you can follow me on Facebook, Loving Life's Journey, and on LinkedIn. I'm under Linda Crunch Novel Wilson, but if you see this face, it's me. I won't try to spell the last name for you.
We'll put it in there.
I'll get that to you. Yeah. It's very German.
Well, again, thank you, Linda. I love what you're doing. I love your story, your journey of perseverance, resilience, and just how you are making such a difference for people to really see that taking care of ourselves is so important. And it started in photography, got into coaching, and all the things that you've had to endure in your journey. But I appreciate you coming on today and just sharing all your wisdom with us.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Of course, make sure to like, subscribe, comment below. What was the biggest takeaway from Linda today? I'm sure she would love to see that comment, and we'll see you on the next episode.